Top 10 Buried Secrets Inside Henry VIII's Royal Tomb. Beneath the magnificent paving stones that millions of tourists calmly tread upon every single day, one of the most formidable kings in history lies swallowed up in a space that is impossibly cramped and unbelievably unfinished. Even more thought-provoking is the fact that he does not rest alone. Sharing that suffocating darkness with the imposing monarch are companions that history never could have anticipated. And most heartbreaking of all is a tiny red velvet-draped coffin belonging to a soul that never even saw the light of day. Why did a supreme ruler, who once held absolutely everything in the palm of his hands, meet such a quiet end, abandoned to the dust of time by his own flesh and blood? Stay with us until the very last second, as we peel back the secrets hidden beneath that permanently sealed black stone. You will uncover a profound, deeply human truth about the fragility of power and what truly remains when the final curtain of life falls. Number 1. The overloaded leaden coffin and nature's accumulation. In January 1547, a bitter winter swept across England, dragging biting winds through every crevice of Whitehall Palace. The regal halls, once bustling with the footsteps of the aristocracy, now sank into a heavy, oppressive silence. Behind those thick stone walls, King Henry VIII was entering his final moments. The monarch who had spent his entire life seizing absolute power, going so far as to alter the nation's entire system of faith, was now facing a battle he could never win: the relentless march of nature. In his twilight years, he no longer strode across sun-drenched jousting arenas or led cavalry charges. Age and physical decay were crushing him. Old wounds from his riding days refused to heal, confining him to sunless rooms. His massive, failing body became a fleshy prison, suffocating every shallow breath. The man who once dictated the fates of thousands now had to rely on a system of wooden pulleys just to move from his bed to his chair. When he finally closed his eyes, the royal court faced an unprecedented logistical nightmare. His attendants had to frantically construct a coffin that far exceeded the standard human dimensions of the era. Following royal protocol, apothecaries and embalmers utilized massive quantities of spices, wrapping the corpse in endless layers of wax-soaked silk. Over this, they layered royal elm wood and solidly welded sheets of solid lead. The nobility desperately hoped that this impenetrable physical shell could seal away and perfectly preserve the deceased's form against the ravages of time. However, no metal on earth can halt the forces of nature. As the journey out of London began, a visceral physical reaction was silently unfolding inside that enclosed space. The rushed embalming process, combined with the rapid decomposition of an oversized body, triggered a catastrophic chemical reaction. Noxious gases built up by the hour. Natural pressure slowly compressed, pushing the lead casing to its absolute breaking point. That colossal horse-drawn carriage was carrying what amounted to a ticking pressure bomb, rolling heavily into the freezing night toward its very first stop. Number 2. The lying-in state at Syon Abbey and the chilling prophecy. The journey to deliver a monarch to his final resting place is rarely a rushed affair. It is a final parade for the public to pay their respects, requiring carefully calculated resting stops. The funeral procession moved sluggishly along roads left muddy by melting snow, finally halting to rest at Syon Abbey. Choosing this location seemed like nothing more than a coincidental geographical pit stop, but under the turning wheel of time, it carried a bitter historical irony. Let us step back into the past for a moment to fully understand. Syon Abbey was once the most tranquil sanctuary in England, home to the Brigittine order. It was a place overflowing with prayers, echoing bells, and the very symbol of peace. Yet, at the absolute height of his fame, it was the king himself who issued the decree to dissolve the abbey. He seized its lands, stripped away its serenity, and forced its inhabitants into exile. The great Syon Abbey was left abandoned, reduced to cold, echoing walls and unglazed windows. Now, he was laying to rest in the very place he had so deeply scarred. That night, the coffin was temporarily placed in the desolate, freezing hall, and it was exactly here that the final threshold of endurance was shattered. The pressure that had accumulated along the road silently defeated the reinforced lead casing. In the dead of night, the metallic folds violently tore open. The final dark-stained remnants of a king seeped through the cracks, dripping slowly and pooling onto the cold marble floor. Stripped of all the cheering crowds and the masking brocades, that moment violently tore away the invisible crown, returning the man to his most naked, primal state. As darkness completely enveloped the hall, the guards stepped outside to escape the biting cold. The scent of decay inadvertently attracted a small, wandering wild animal desperately seeking warmth. The creature slipped through the cracks of the broken bricks, approached, and driven by pure instinct, went straight for the dark fluids on the stone floor. This exact detail was accidentally witnessed by the attendant plumbers. The sight forced them to hold their breath, for it aligned perfectly with an event from exactly 15 years prior. Back then, Friar William Peto had bravely stood before the king, borrowing an ancient biblical tale to warn him that wild beasts would come and lick his remains, as a dark reciprocation of fate. At the time, the king had scoffed and dismissed the warning. Now, this fulfillment echoed like the mournful, cyclical voice of time. Yet, the story doesn't end there. As the coffin finally reached its destination at St. George's Chapel, the man who once monopolized royal power surely never expected to share his eternal sleep with companions harboring such profound melancholy. Number 3. The Gathering of Rejected Phantoms. Whenever we speak of royal mausoleums, we naturally picture timeless architectural marvels, rooms glittering with gold, exquisitely carved statues, and towering marble columns stretching up to catch the sunlight. But the space buried deep beneath the paving stones of St. George's Chapel's nave tells a completely different story. This vault does not open into a radiant expanse. Rather, it resembles a cramped exile room for souls forgotten by time, forced to lie side by side in suffocation and eternal darkness. Descending the damp stone steps, the king's coffin does not sit solitary in a vast, dominating space like he once did on his throne. Instead, he was placed right next to Jane Seymour, his third wife, and the only woman he truly recognized as his legitimate queen, requesting to be buried beside her. Her life was a brief and quiet melody. She wore the crown for barely more than a year, departing this world immediately after giving the dynasty its much-desired male heir. She lies there in a modestly sized coffin, shrinking into a small corner, a stark contrast to the massive, imposing figure of her husband beside her. That already claustrophobic space was forced to bear the weight of yet another tragic historical dirge. The dust of time settled for over a century, until the winter of 1649, when the vault doors swung open once more to receive a latecomer, King Charles I. This was an era when England was drowning in violent turmoil. Charles I lost his crown, his kingdom, and was ultimately sent to the executioner's block. Even more tragic, the victorious Parliament outright refused to grant him a state funeral. There was no national mourning, no public eulogy, no grandiose displays of grief. Amidst the rushed, restrictive atmosphere of the time, his loyal attendants could only quietly seek out a makeshift resting place. They carried Charles I's coffin down into this vault on a night of heavy snowfall, sliding it in parallel to his predecessors. Three figures, representing drastically different eras of rise and fall, now shared the dim, suffocating air of the underworld. Two kings harboring the violent fluctuations of history, and one fragile queen. This gathering exposes a profoundly silent perspective on fate. Individuals who once summoned the winds and called the rain, who reigned on extravagant thrones, now lie so tightly packed together they cannot even stretch. Yet, the deepest sorrow in this room does not emanate from the headless king, nor from the queen whose youth was cut short. The most suffocating knot of this story comes from a tiny coffin, lying silently, crushing all the remaining dignity of this royal sanctuary. Number 4. The parasitic coffin of the nameless infant. Amidst the massive blocks of lead and aged oak bearing the seals of monarchs, an entirely out-of-place object catches the eye of any who have explored the tomb. Perched precariously right on top of King Charles, I's coffin is a small mahogany box, draped in a deep crimson velvet. After enduring centuries in a damp subterranean environment, that once brilliant velvet has faded, frayed, and is now coated in a thick layer of dust and spiderwebs. This is no royal treasure, no classified document, and no spoil of war from distant lands. It is the resting place of a tiny life, the remains of a child who never even got to cry their first cry. In an era severely limited by medical understanding, the loss of royal children was a constant, agonizing reality. But the way they arranged this specific infant's resting place invites profound reflection. According to records clarified during an 1813 excavation, it was determined to be a short-lived child of King Charles II, while other documents suggest it belonged to the royal family under James II. Regardless of whose child it was, the blood flowing through that tiny being was the blood of the kingdom's ultimate rulers. Yet, the kingdom held no ceremonies to send the child off. There were no black-draped carriages, no tolls from the watchtowers, no comforting hymns echoing through the chapels. Someone simply picked up this coffin, walked down those dark stairs, brought it into the vault, and placed it there for a brutally pragmatic reason. The flat surface on the lid of former King Charles I's coffin was simply the most convenient, level spot available at the time. That act, whether justified by the urgency of the era or the stark reality of 17th-century burial habits, still carries a choking sense of grief. A child bearing royal blood, stripped of any identity, lying there, the physical weight of its box pressing directly down onto the coffin of the king below. This arrangement strips bare the decay of reverence. When the tides of history shift, even a once worshipped monarch cannot escape having his minimal personal space violated. His coffin was no longer untouchable ground. That crimson velvet box silently preserves a deeply sorrowful chapter on how the living treat history once the lights go out. A place where sacred dignity is forced to yield to cold, unfeeling convenience. Number 5. The Headless King and the Theft of Reverence. The wheel of time ground relentlessly through the centuries, blanketing the royal vault in thick layers of obscuring dust. New generations were born, new dynasties took control, and that silent tomb slowly faded into absolute oblivion. That is, until 1813, during the era of the Prince Regent, later King George IV, when the royal family commissioned a massive renovation for St. George Chapel. During the clearing and foundation digging process, the marble slabs were accidentally shifted, and the vault was thrown open once again. The flickering light from torches cast long shadows down onto the coffin of King Charles I. Inside, all that remained were the fragmented traces of an incomplete body. But the natural erosion of 200 years was not nearly as heartbreaking as the callousness of his living peers. The most shocking incident stemmed directly from human ego, occurring right before the eyes of some of the most powerful figures in England at the time. Taking advantage of the chaos, the dim lighting, and the morbid curiosity of the crowd, the reigning royal physician, Sir Henry Halford, committed an incredibly shadowy act. The very hands entrusted with the mission of healing, hands that took the pulses of the aristocracy, quietly slipped into the opened coffin. He secretly extracted exactly the fourth cervical vertebra, the very bone bearing the fatal axe mark that ended the king's reign, along with a lock of his beard. He executed this theft in utter silence, but its echo struck a devastating blow to the concept of dignity. Later on, this famous doctor would encase the bone fragment in a wooden box, treating it as a personal trophy, a morbid novelty to flaunt his elite privilege. He would pass it around for guests to marvel at during dinner parties filled with raucous laughter, reducing a literal piece of a sovereign's body into a cheap parlor trick for the upper echelon. This grotesque spectacle lasted for 75 years until it finally met its end in 1888. The Prince of Wales, who would become King Edward VII, upon accidentally discovering the existence of this morbid artifact through Halford's descendants, was deeply horrified. He immediately issued a royal command forcing the return of the remains to their exact original location in the vault. The repatriation of a single bone fragment after nearly a century of wandering, after being used as a source of twisted entertainment, leaves a stinging sense of sorrow. A box containing a vertebra was sealed and placed back atop the coffin. The dignity that was lost, even when hastily patched together by delayed orders and belated rituals, left behind an eternal ugly scar on history. Let us pause for a beat at this exact moment. If the remains of a sovereign, lying within the royal vault itself, could be so easily dismissed and violated, what state do you think Henry VIII, the man who made the most ruthless decisions in all of England, is currently in? The truth at the bottom of the vault will force you to reframe your entire perspective on royal power. If you feel a connection to these shadowed historical narratives, please leave a subscription. Your connection is the driving force that allows us to continue decoding history. Number 6. The tyrant's form exposed beneath rotting wood. The blinding aura that once made all of Europe cower before Henry VIII came to an absolute standstill at the threshold of this very vault. In the minds of his contemporaries, his mausoleum was meant to be the ultimate convergence of architectural mastery, a place truly worthy of the title Defender of the Faith that he so proudly wore. However, the reality lying beneath the chapel floor violently exposes a brutal truth. There is no radiant light, no bronze reliefs praising his divine merits, no sparkling Italian marble, and certainly no silken drapes cushioning his eternal sleep. When the lanterns of 19th-century explorers swept across that cramped space, they were met with a sight dripping with the dark sarcasm of fate. The gargantuan oak coffin, the final physical shell bearing his royal seal had completely collapsed. The damp subterranean environment, conspiring with the slow grind of time, had decomposed the solid wood, leaving nothing behind but rotting splinters and blinding dust. The inner layer of lead, once tasked with the grand mission of hermetically sealing and protecting the monarch's body, had burst wide open at the center, warped and violently distorted like an empty, hollowed-out cocoon. Under the sickly yellow glow of the candles, all that remained of the man who had hoarded unimaginable wealth, who had owned dozens of magnificent palaces, was a skeletal frame and scattered debris mixed into the dirt. While at the zenith of his power, Henry VIII made countless decisions that altered the fates of thousands to solidify his absolute might. He built massive coastal fortresses, equipped terrifying fleets, and plundered the riches of countless lands. A man burdened with an ego of that magnitude should have possessed a tomb that eclipsed the wonders of the ancient world. And indeed, he had once harbored blueprints for exactly that. He had recruited the finest sculptors in Europe to sketch out his final resting place. But the stark reality laid bare in the dirt mocks the mortal pursuit of immortality. A bare skeleton lying amidst physical ruins proves an immutable law. Time bows to no titles. Number 7. The golden illusion buried in black earth. Even during the golden days when his dynasty stood at its absolute peak, Henry VIII's mind had already drawn up the blueprints for his eternal house. That design shattered the confines of a traditional tomb, serving as a direct challenge to time itself. He took over an unfinished tomb project and exponentially expanded its scale. He ordered sculptors to cast towering solid bronze pillars and pave the floor with pitch-black marble dragged in from distant continents. The initial plan called for an astonishing 144 brass statues, intricate reliefs chronicling his life, accents of pure gold leaf, all surrounded by an army of knight statues holding banners aloft. He demanded that even after he closed his eyes, the underworld itself would have to bow before his magnificent monument. And yet, no matter how vast the ambition, it could not replenish a treasury bled dry by vanity projects and resource-draining military campaigns. The sheer volume of bronze and marble required devoured a colossal fortune that the royal court simply could not pay for. The moment he drew his last breath, the construction of this monument to immortality, still completely unfinished, was immediately halted. The project was tossed into a dark corner. The detailed blueprints gathered a thick layer of forgotten dust, and the brass components were later melted down or sold off to fund the state's more pressing needs. They hurriedly shoved him beneath the floorboards of the chapel, leaving him to rest in a crude, unrefined space. There are no bronze angels, no statues of knights. A single, humble black slab, blending into the floor, became his sole identifying marker. It is so utterly unremarkable that unless you are actively looking for it, you could easily walk right over it. Why could not a mighty empire shoulder the cost of a tomb for the very man who built it? The most agonizing answer does not lie in the empty royal coffers or the lack of building materials, but in the very flesh and blood he left behind on this earth. Number 8. The final retribution. Alienation from his own flesh and blood. Henry VIII's entire life revolved around a ruthless effort to tear down all obstacles and shatter ancient traditional laws, all fueled by a desperate craving for a male heir to the throne. He firmly believed that his bloodline would act as an unbreakable anchor to preserve his legacy. continue his unfinished projects, and complete the grand tapestry of power he had envisioned. But nature always arranges things in its own way, entirely outside the bounds of human calculation. When he died, all three of the children he left behind, Edward VI, Mary I, and Elizabeth I, took turns ascending the throne. Despite harboring wildly different political and religious ideologies, they managed to achieve one silent, invisible consensus. They completely ignored their father's final wishes. Those children carried their own deep-seated scars and political calculations. Edward took the throne when he was far too young, leaving power in the hands of regents. Mary dedicated her time to aggressively reversing her father's policies. Elizabeth I, the woman who ushered England into its golden age, inherited a nation desperately in need of stability. She merely authorized a pitiful token budget for the bare minimum maintenance of her father's makeshift grave, choosing instead to funnel her resources into fortifying the nation's image. Later on, they poured all their focus into constructing magnificent tombs for themselves within the sacred grounds of Westminster Abbey. Elizabeth I rests beneath a breathtakingly intricate white marble architectural masterpiece, while her father remains buried beneath the floor of the Windsor Chapel. They quietly turned their backs, leaving the man who once terrorized Europe to rot in an unfinished, forgotten vault. Abandoned by his own flesh and blood, all his illusions of eternal worship evaporated. Returning to the cold earth, his coffin exposes a dark corner of absolute, terminal loneliness. An entire lifetime spent hunting for an heir, only to be met with deafening apathy from those very successors. Number 9. The haunting contrast of bottomless greed. Physical space is always the most honest mirror reflecting psychological damage. Even after he was laid into the earth, stripped of breath and the ability to issue commands, Henry VIII still refused to yield an inch of space to anyone. His coffin stretched over 2 meters long, bulging out grotesquely, a final, desperate attempt to cling to domination. Its sheer, colossal size was not merely a technical necessity to contain a rotting body. It was the physical manifestation of an uncontrollable ego. It monopolizes nearly the entirety of the vault's modest square footage, casting a dark, heavy shadow over those around him, squeezing the walking space so tight that a person can barely slip past. That massive dimension creates a razor-sharp contrast when placed directly adjacent to the shrinking, modest coffin of Queen Jane Seymour. His heart had stopped beating, yet Henry's ego continued to aggressively overwrite the space of his companions. That staggering difference in size acts like a slow-motion film, replaying his entire life, a constant, insatiable hunger to conquer, to expand, and to overshadow the fates of everyone else. He had eclipsed the lives of 6 wives, of countless loyal courtiers, and now he continues to eclipse the literal space beneath the earth. He tried to forcefully seize a dominating position in eternity, but inside there is nothing left but ruin. The rotting wood could not sustain the majestic form he so desperately craved. That heavy, oppressive presence actually caused the succeeding generations of the British royal family to quietly recoil. Later dynasties, when selecting their final resting places, deliberately chose newer, far more spacious vaults in entirely different locations. They made a conscious choice to close this chapter of history forever, not just to avoid the structural reality of an overcrowded vault, but to bury the bitter, uncomfortable truths about human nature itself. Number 10. The permanently sealed door to the underworld. Unlike the grand mausoleums of many monarchs that leave their doors wide open to welcome the sunlight and the footsteps of pilgrims, where people can reach out to touch the reliefs and read the engraved epitaphs, Henry VIII's vault beneath St. George Chapel met a fate of absolute closure. Faced with the shocking decay of the coffins and the highly sensitive nature of the space, the British royal family made their final ruling. They walled the vault shut with heavy bricks and used thick plates of lead to permanently seal the crypt doors. A flat layer of marble flooring was paved directly over top, eternally severing that subterranean space from the world of the living. Not a single soul, be it an elite historian, a wandering tourist, or anyone driven by morbid curiosity, is permitted to step foot into that silent underworld ever again. The realm of unfinished ambitions, of overlapping, suffocating tragedies, is locked tight beneath layers of stone and metal. The door connecting the past to the present has been slammed shut. Today, the millions of people who visit the chapel every year can only pause in the central nave, bowing their heads to look at a flat, unremarkable black stone. Many do not even realize they are standing directly on top of the resting place of the most infamous king in English history. Beneath that mute marble slab, the red velvet slowly bleeds its color away, and the fractured metal folds sink deeper into the pitch black. The monumental legacy this king tried to leave behind is, in truth, heartbreakingly empty. There is not a single genuine tear of mourning from his own bloodline, nor a towering monument broadcasting his divine merits. His lifelong crusade to expand his power through ruthless, blood-soaked decisions ultimately bought him nothing but a cramped, freezing sleep, forever devoid of the sun. We have taken this journey together to peel back the layers of these sealed secrets. All these melancholic fragments are not recounted simply to cast judgment, but to allow us to reflect on our own present. Through the unforgiving lens of time, every desperate pursuit of glory becomes overwhelmingly small. Life is an inherently finite journey, and exactly how we treat one another every single day will dictate the true legacy we leave behind. Real greatness does not lie in how many square meters of earth you manage to conquer when you are finally laid to rest. It lies in how much warmth you manage to preserve in the memories of those who stay behind. Much like the haunting contrast deep below the ground, the tiny, red velvet-wrapped coffin of a soul that never even cried. Its first cry demands exactly as much contemplation as the almighty monarch who once shifted the entire world. Thank you for staying with us until these very last seconds. If today's story brought you a moment of meaningful reflection, do not forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and share your most honest thoughts with us down in the comments section.